What up, though? This is your brother Yusef Bunty Shakur with my comrade Quasi. Tawana Neiman is not here today. She's somewhere outside the country enjoying herself. We'll wish her the best when she get back. I'm pretty sure she's gonna be fiery. Have a lot of new information for us that she normally do. So enjoy. Salute. We here with another hot topic, another hot discussion. Bam.
Yes,
Turn it up to my brother.
yes. Tomorrow we got a live in person over at the General Brick Institute related to Detroit Shakur Squad, ad hoc assembly of brothers and sisters, comrades, and allies who came together to campaign for the release of Dr. Shakur. Shakur Squad, named after Mutulu was also transitioned into a Detroit chapter of the Jericho Movement, which is a national organization that does the work of raising a profile and campaigning on behalf of political prisoners inside these United States. So Detroit will be having an event celebrating and highlighting and raising the profile of our organization and joining this work, the Detroit Jericho chapter. We'll be doing that tomorrow at the Baker Institute from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Please come out. It's going to be an interesting evening. It's going to be festive and informative. So definitely check that out.
Bam. Books. I think I talked about this book before, but I finished it. Actually, we have a book signing that's coming up on June 18th at Source Bookstore. The author will be there. The American Family. The Scores and the Nation that it created. I highly recommend this book. Let me put it back up there one more time. Hope to see it. Um, Especially if you watch the Tupac documentary of him and his mother, Dear Mama, or you plan on watching, I think this will be a good tie-in with that. There's a lot of intersection, a lot of overlapping around the New York 21. Um, it actually goes in more in depth with Afeni in terms of her giving birth to Pac, circumstances around it, the circumstances with her and Lumumba. Um, with the documentary, it's the first time that we've really seen a lot of footage about Zay Shakur, Lumumba Shakur. That this book, besides what's the book? The New York, the collective writings. Dang, I can't think of the name
In
right.
the whirlwind.
Yeah, in the Whirlwind. Thank you. First book that was ever written about the New York chapter of the Black Panther Party. So this book is, in my opinion, I think it's like an extension of that. So I highly recommend this book, man. If you're in the struggle, I think we should be. Should be a study. If you're interested, a lot of things that you've heard is not a complete analysis, but it can lead you to some things. One more time.
So it's going to be who's going to be at that discussion. Going to be you, Curry, and the author. Am I
Yes,
correct?
yes. Elijah Holly, yeah, he will be in town signing the book and things. I'm excited to be a part of this. Of course, yep, June 18th. Check us out.
So we're in town over there on Cass Avenue.
Correct, correct.
And that's relative to when you're talking about the transition of the support squad, which is so named after Mutulu Shakur, who we was doing putting in the work around, who is now on this side of the bar while with us. But he was also among those this book that comes out as one of the extended family members of the Shakur family.
Right.
So being that Saladin was
Absolutely.
being uh, the patriarch, so to speak, of this family. So I look forward to that conversation with Yukari and the author over at Source Booksellers. But reading this book, it brought to my point a lot of different things. One of the things that I'm enjoying is how he's pulling all the pieces of the struggle together.
Hmm.
That period of transition from civil rights to Black Power, uh, which led to development in the struggle insofar as all aspects have has two different tendencies, a dual tendency built into it. The civil rights had a radical tendency that split off became, because we know that at one point that SNCC, Student Violent Coordinating Committee, was partial of the civil rights movement. However, uh, at the point of the splintering organization of the forward advance development of civil rights into black liberation came when they began to declare black power in 1966, which also spawned eventually the development of Black Panther Party later on in 1966. Two chapters actually, because the New York chapter, which the American family, this book on Shakur family discusses, the New York chapter of the Black Panther Party, as well as the Oakland founding of the Black Panther Party for self-defense. So it kind of shows all these branches growing out of a single tendency and struggle toward greater radicalism, commitment towards national liberation, and taking a split from integrationist role.
But in saying that, as we prepare for our topic, could an argument be made that militant position was initiated with Martin Delany, was picked up by the African Blood Brotherhood?
Well, let me say this: throughout our history, there's always been multiple tendencies
Right.
that uh, envision liberation. One
Mhm.
of the things I've been kind of exploring lately, I've been pondering deeply on, is when we talk about, let's talk about these three tendencies. These three tendencies is integration. There's always been an integrationist tendency. We can go all the way back to Crispus Attucks, and how they projected him as the first person to die in the American Revolution. uh, and it's a tendency of African people who did aspire toward full American, you know what I'm saying? And now those are notably those who weren't enslaved, those who stayed in Pennsylvania, early New York, and some of these non-slave holding communities. And some, New York did have slavery. A lot of the northern places had slavery early on, and they abolished it early before it took deep roots in the Black Belt South. However, one of the things I was thinking about is we talked about class struggle, we talked about tendencies reflecting aspirations, and there was a group of Africans in the North who they used the term African and name it like African Methodist
Mhm.
Episcopalian Church, AME Church.
Paul.
You had a lot of like Masonic groups, you know what I'm saying, that held the African name prominent. Everyone, but there's another thing happening at the time was they were reading literature as they, mind you, they come over as enslaved, as captives, as
Right.
human, victims of human trafficking. But some of these Africans are living in this liberal North where they're reading this literature of enlightenment, this Victorian age literature of right. And so now they're reading these philosophies, these Europeans, and Europeans, of course, are projecting themselves as superior, as the most civilized, and Africans as not. And so a lot of these, though they still clinging on to African, to the name in some ways, a lot of them were still becoming what you call amalgamated, assimilated into European cultural norms.
Mhm.
Some of them espoused or advocated for the liberation or abolishment of slavery, but very few were wearing, donning African apparel. No one were they weren't naming themselves, or seeking to name themselves African names, because they were also trying to remain accepted. I was thinking about respectability politics, having an early development. Then they don't want to ruffle any feathers because they know how easy it was to be subjected in a land where they were still kind of foreign to. So we had this class struggle, these tendencies of integration. We have people that want to go back to Africa. We think of
Paul Coffey.
Paul Kofi and
Yeah.
African colonization societies, and later on that was in the early 1700s. Late in 1850s, brother Martin Delany was exploring land right at the outset when the Civil War launched. He came back and participated. He was all about liberation for African people. Period. And he had, he took he had multiple tendencies. One of them was uh, returning to Africa. He was
So he
going to
said, oh,
negotiate
so you
land.
say tendency to my strategy.
Tendencies, which is these impulses within us.
Okay.
Tendencies within the moon. We talk about the integration tendency, the repatriationist tendency, and we also had a tendency for we call just self-determination on
Okay.
land over here. And Mark Delaney also shared that tendency as well. So that's why I say he was about liberation by any means necessary. If you had to say anybody any means necessary, he was willing to integrate. He was willing to repatriate. He was willing to separate on land because he also explored land in Central America and other areas in his parts for us to settle as a nation. Because he was one of the earliest people I can record that who referred to us as a nation within a nation.
And that's where he's the title, the father of
Black
black
nationalism.
nationalism. Correct.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Martin Delaney is also one of those undersung heroes in our struggle. One of those voices who, who really did a lot of work. He wrote a couple books articulating who we were as a nation based on the frameworks of the mid 1800s.
So with that, I think that sets the groundwork for our topic, right? Even these tendencies, as you describe, integration, going back to Africa, or independence, was all subjugated by counterintelligence or counterinsurance movement to undermine, to disrupt, to try to control. So that's part of our conversation
Well,
today.
yes, yes. Well, actually, I mean, we had to establish one fact, and that is, and Malcolm made it clear in that I believe it was the message of the grassroots speech that we weren't oppressed because we was Baptist, Protestant,
Right.
Muslim, Democrat, Republican, gang member, college student, single mother. You know, we were simply oppressed because of who we are. As African people in America. And the bottom line is we were brought over here to oppress. Not oppress for what? Oppression is like, that's just, you bully the kid at school for what purpose? You know what I'm saying? You just having fun. It wasn't fun. They oppressed us so they can exploit us. Period. At the end of the day, we are a nation that's still an object of their exploitation. They degrade us to exploit us. They degrade us to make oppression easier. And by degrading, we're talking about that's the reason why they stripped us of our history, our religion, our culture, our names, our sense of identity, which is new in world history in the manner in which it was implemented against us. That was new because it didn't happen to the same extent. Just say some of the Spanish colonies or some of the French colonies. It did. In Brazil. I mean,
But not on a mass level.
at the concentrated level, United States. It was but they also had a deeper level of oppression for us.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was total extraction, nonstop, labor and production. And so it has carried on in new ways because we still lack our culture. We fund I dare say $1 billion hair industry, tennis shoe industry. Uh, we we kill, rob, and steal to buy stolen jewels that all originally belonged to African people, the ice and the gold and the platinum. So that we can flaunt in these African gems, these minerals and ores from the earth. And we do this, but we do it from a deculturalized space where we kind of dislocated as a people. And but it's done so that we may be exploited. We are a consumer population. We are a market in the United States. And so when we look at ourselves as a nation, those tendencies could persisted over time. Each generation, you can see those those are very general tendencies, but they persisted. Frederick Douglass, who, what I'm saying, a very prominent figure prior to the Civil War and after.
Great orator.
But he was an integrationist. You know what I'm saying? He was an integrationist. At the same time, he functioned alongside Martin Delaney. You go up to the 1920s. You had the NAACP, which is integrationist organization, but did you also have the repatriationist tendency with Marcus Garvey and UNIA?
But one thing, well, before NAACP, we had the Niagara movement.
Yes, which was it was a more
Second.
radical version of integrationism,
Mhm.
but it definitely yes, and it was other tendencies before and after, just using some of the more prominent
Yeah.
names that we may be familiar with.
But also, I mean, just throwing that in there because the NAACP pretty much compromised the Niagara movement.
Yes, it did. It did. Because Niagara movement was a black movement.
Yeah, it was all black.
It was a black movement.
Petty,
it was
petty bourgeois, so to speak.
yeah, but it was definitely a radical black integrationist organization that foretold some of the things that King began to advocate for close to the end of his life after the March on Washington.
And just to illustrate, I mean, Niagara movement had W. Du Bois, Ida B. Wells,
Monroe Trotter.
I mean, who's who of that period was participating in the Niagara movement. So, yeah.
Yes. So Du Bois was right. He was absolutely a part of that, and he had a radical tone at turn of the century. But one thing about philanthropy.
Hold on. They said rewind.
Philanthropy, you know what I'm saying? It tones down radicalism, and that's one of the reasons why I've kind of been hesitant on the line. A lot of this money that's floating around here, not that we can't use it, but primarily because a lot of times it has come with strings attached, and it has been shapers and shifters of our philosophical approach to struggle, and we began to modify our goals and objectives based on our funders.
Give a shout out to Some Star Body. See that?
You know what I'm saying? Well, hold on now. That's our brother.
Yes.
Conant Gardens.
Absolutely. Conant Garden OG.
That's what's up. So and we had to be clear that those organizations did have great potential. They had great intention. Like I say, Martin Delany, to refer back to him, he was by any means necessary. Whatever it took to retrieve human dignity and liberation of African people, where we weren't second class, second rank, to nobody. And of course, the way America is made, that is an impossibility. And one of the things that brought that to light was I did a review yesterday of the congressional hearings from 1998 around the CIA report that came out in response to the Dark Alliance investigative news series by Gary Webb from the San Jose Mercury News around the CIA crack conspiracy. And I watched it when it first came out. I wrote a book about drugs and black people. That was the name of the book I wrote around 1996, 1997, when all these things were happening, was in the news cycle. Ricky Ross, it was everywhere, the news, but it was also a lot of expose information circulating. I got a lot of receipts from in writing this. I collected a lot of information related to the government's involvement in drug peddling, which is a form of chemical warfare, because ultimately what we're talking about is us as a nation. We're talking about warfare waged against our nation. We also talking about decolonization, because if we are a nation within a nation, as Martin Delany said, then the only way to liberate the one nation that's dominated by the other nation, because we're not under another nation voluntarily. We didn't choose to be under American, was my brother Hondo referred to as half Americans.
Right, half Americans.
Or well, we used to refer to as hyphenated Americans, and which is all the same to me, because we are not Americans. Period. We are, and I use the term because I honor Queen Mother more. I honor her long commitment, her lifelong commitment. She lived to 100 years old. And she stood on the line. She was a member from everything from Marcus Garvey movement to the Million Man March. I mean, and she was involved and committed throughout her life. She is what was referred to as a long distance runner, and she was about liberation. She recognized us as a nation. She was a pivotal member, the first person to sign the new African Declaration of Independence in 1968 here in Detroit. And she also proposed the term New African
Hmm.
as the name of this nation because, we were referring to the Black nation, the Negro nation. We referred to the nation very often over the generations. However, every nation has a name. Haiti is a name. Jamaica is a name. Trinidad is a name. Guyana and Grenada. And, we can go on and on. Nations have names. Guyana, Mali, uh, Nigeria, of course, that came from Britain. But we have names. Nations have names, and nationality is what you call people of a nation. We call them Haitians. We don't say, the former Africans who were enslaved by the French. We call them Jamaicans. What do we call us? The Blackians? The Blackites?
He's black.
Black is a color, and it's not a nationality. It's a description in this very polarized society where they try to use the term, whites to define themselves. And I have moved also away from that because they are settlers. That's the most apt description because they settled here. They just like the people in Israel, uh, where is actually dominated Palestine, settled colonized Palestine. They call themselves Israelis. In South Africa, they call themselves Afrikaners during the apartheid regime. But one of the terms I understood was called Azania.
Hmm.
We talk about the people in Australia. Settlers. They left Europe. They left Europe and they planted their feet in the soils of other lands after they forcibly militarily dominated those people. In many cases, committed genocide upon those people, and then claimed the land for themselves. That is the essence of settler colonialism. But then they used the natives that survived to oppress, to exploit, to degrade, to make them less than that settler population. So we had to be clear that we are not Americans. They are Americans. Americans are settlers, and to accept America is also to accept the genocide. Is also accept the enslavement of our people, the ongoing legacy of like that would follow the neo-colonial legacy, which included Jim Crow and all his various ills and ugliness, and all the way up to now with mass incarceration. And one of the things I got out of that YouTube, it's on YouTube. The hearings that they had, Maxine Waters was very, very vocal. And what I thought about is all these Congress officials who was at this hearing in 1998 weren't privy. And I'm gonna be clear, they weren't privy of what the CIA was doing. CIA don't tell everybody in the government what they're doing. Only those key personnel that's relevant to their actions may know. But everybody, all these Congress people didn't know that the CIA was, giving drugs, was allowing the influx of drugs into this community, which is a form of chemical warfare. And Maxine Waters did a deep dive into diligence. All these congressional people was like, it couldn't happen. It wasn't really happening. It just, they was trying to go with the media, the Washington Post, New York Times, some of these LA Times, who was dismissing Gary Webb's investigator reporting and had all these receipts. And I was collecting receipts as fast as they was coming out. And they was able to name names. They was able to name names, and everybody was dismissing it. Maxine Waters represented. I swear, this generation don't have a clue. But one of the things that I walked away from with these Congress people don't give a damn. They don't give a damn. And they didn't care how many people was dying from crack. How many people? Because actually they doubled up. Not just was the crack devastating our community, but they created laws around crack that increased the sentences or separated or distinguished it from powder cocaine, which was more prominent in the settler American community. And so we was getting more time. So not only were they devastating the community through chemical warfare, they was also sentenced to prison and record. That's war. That's war. I mean, ain't no other way to describe that attack. And
We
these tendencies still exist. And those same Congress people who maybe then change seats, play musical chairs today, also don't care about their own cellular American population because they gave a pass to the people that put out the Oxycontin that's kind of jump started the opioid epidemic, the Sackler family.
Yeah, I mean, but when you put it in historical context, that's nothing new. When America got
Facts.
was it opia to
Oh, that's the second. This is the second
yeah,
opioid epidemic.
yeah, to China when China was like, no, y'all can't come in. And, all right, we'll come in through the back door. Drug them up and whatnot. So part of that is the undermining of a community, undermining of a people. So to
Destabilizing.
yeah, correct. Um, so when Quasi describes us as a nation that represents a national or our nationality is represented through our name, we're talking about we're identifying the common thread, a common history, a common struggle, a common culture, a common people. All these things will constitute a nation. And for whatever reason, we have not wanted to look at that collectively. And then the times that we have, they found a way to undermine that. So fast forward that where we at, we'll say we're in the 80s when crack cocaine becomes very prominent. This is after that. This is the aftermath.
Hold on, no, you can't skip over. Now that's a stage we can't skip over the period in the 40s and the 50s when during the period when the United States was trying to when the West was trying to push back against fascism
Oh yeah.
in Italy and Mussolini, and they released they gave Charlie Luciano
Oh yeah.
who over La Cosa Nostra, the Italian mafia, gave him a pass. They figured if we can you can get you into Italy, we let you out of prison. You go to Italy, help us, mobilize the troops against Mussolini.
Right.
And we'll let we kind of gave them a pass. They began to bringing in that that's when what they call
the heroin.
the heroin started coming in droves.
Right.
And that was before the Vietnam War.
Right.
But it began to intensify by the 70s. Heroin began to devastate the community.
I mean, it was an old head told me when I was in the joint. It was that heroin was so fluid in our neighborhoods that was like 9 liters. They created what's called like penny capsules.
Yes, yes, it was. And they cut it so much, but it was so. They was getting it raw back then through, what I'm saying, the Bermuda Triangle over there, and I'm gonna say that's one of the things that led to the war in Vietnam was France was that was a colony of France, and the Vietnamese was fighting France. The United States jumped in after the Vietnamese whooped France first. How Malcolm X he said it in a tone of affection. He said, what I'm saying, because he had mad loving respect for the Vietnamese, but he said them little rice farmers and sandals whooped. Man, he was trying to make a point about our capacity and how we view ourselves. And he said these rice farmers whooped them. They chased the France out, and the United States couldn't allow it.
I think George makes a similar comment about Vietnam. George Jackson.
Yeah, what I'm saying. They couldn't what they versus how we were behaving. That's part of the discussion is stepping up our game. We don't understand low intensity operations, the small ways in which they inflict pain upon us on a day-to-day basis. Through rent hikes. The people can't afford to have somewhere to live. The water shut off. These are low intensity forms of warfare. The drug infusion, the mass incarceration, and you add all these things up, and it add up to a nation that's destabilized to where the only way out is to escape as an individual.
And then, I mean, like the history that you laid out with the organizations, right, politically, who are fighting for our liberation, part of that low intensity war was arresting, like if you're on the corner selling newspaper, arresting you for selling newspaper.
Yes.
Breaking in and disrupting the free breakfast program. I mean, there was.
That was right. That was a form of counterinsurgency. They use counterintelligence. All right, let's talk about it. Counterintelligence is the knowledge that they amass to use against us. counterintelligence. We're talking about they're countering, what they know about us.
So there's been a surveillance,
yes,
intense surveillance has been going on
and
for
now,
decades, years.
Yes, and we live in a more intensified surveillance era because now it's worse. But if we haven't mastered the old stuff, then we lost today.
Yeah.
And the bottom line is, we're just trying to really get us on the page where we're thinking about these things, that we begin to consider new ways to activate. Because we have political prayer, like we're talking about this event tomorrow at the Journal Baker Institute. We still have a slew of political prisoners, and we have a number.
Can you talk about what is a political prisoner?
We're talking about people that was on the front lines, engaged in struggle on behalf of the people who were arrested and detained as common criminals. We're talking about the work of the Black Liberation Army, members of the Black Panther Party, who was doing the work serving the people. And in serving the people, they saw that as a threat. And in seeing that as a threat, they sought to deter or to scare people away from this organizing activity by, like they talked about in the Tupac documentary with on Hulu with about him and Finney, is how the organization began to use all their resources just to get members out of jail, to get lawyers to defend their cases.
So you're talking about the New York 21 case?
Yes, the New York 21 case, but it happened around the country in that same fashion.
Right,
it happened with Fred Hampton when they got him on the ice cream situation. So now we began to divert our attention.
Bobby Seale in Connecticut.
Yes, and so we had these tendencies where they divert our attentions. Now we're defending, and it's important because we must defend those who stepped out there, courageously, and you know what I'm saying, made these sacrifices and stood the line. We have people that's been in there 30, 40, 50 years. Jaleel Muntaqim was in prison 49 years.
Hold on, before we get further, so you talked about political prison, then there's prisoners of war.
Yes, prisoners of war, those who are engaged in direct combat in this war. And let's keep it, there's when we talk about war, some people always think in terms of legality, what's legal, what's illegal.
So let's use West 92 as you break that down, because most people are familiar with Nelson Mandela.
All right, and the ANC.
Correct. But we don't connect that to, as you're talking about.
Yes, he was absolutely a political prisoner. He did 27 years.
But it fits within what you're about to talk about.
And anti-apartheid, right. I mean, come on. Counterinsurgency been with us. I mean, our struggle's been infiltrated by the state. I mean, I go back as far as Gabriel Prosser.
Shit, we go back far. That was
I'm using familiar name.
Right,
1800. No, absolutely. I got documentation about this in 1700s.
Yeah, I mean, most of us saw Woman King. There was infiltration there.
Right. So, all right. That was even prior to us making it to the West. I mean, in trying to understand some of these dynamics, and it's important that we understand these dynamics because we're trying to learn the lessons that we can make a leap forward.
Right.
We can't go beyond what we understand of the past. We can continue to repeat the same mistakes because we think within the same flawed logics of how to move without underestimating the enemy. And the enemy is a step ahead of the game because they the ones who initiated this. They initiated the war. They perpetuate the war. We're reacting. I mean, I'm gonna be clear. We are reacting. And when I say reacting is we tend to mobilize generally around high profile mobilizations such as George Floyd.
Yeah, and let me add this too though. So not only we're reacting, what you've laid out, in that reaction, we're still politically immature.
No, that's a sign of our political immaturity.
Yes. But I'm talking about politically immature of as a nation that's fighting for liberation. So let's establish this. A liberation struggle may go on for 200 years. It may go on for
it's been going on for 400 years.
Yeah, well, I'm saying in terms of we don't necessarily overstand that, right? So at the emergence of our struggle, we're in our infancy stages. So we allowed ourselves to be getting taken advantage. Like when folks were saying, I didn't know COINTELPRO existed. Like we should have expected that. But now in the current times,
the Panthers had an excuse.
But they
did. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, they had an excuse insofar as we had this naive notions about what can and
But
can't
they,
happen
right, but they had
in America.
right, exactly. But also they had this.
It's illegal to do this. It's illegal for police to kick somebody's ass, but
also,
they do it every day.
But and also I think that's part of that double consciousness. Well, on one hand, we're saying we fight liberation, but then on the other hand, we subdue ourselves to that assimilation. Like, oh, we're American since they wouldn't do that to us, which is bullshit, right? And we have to break away from that. But also, we're not doing enough study because a lot of things that we're talking about, it was there. People were just jumping to the front lines, and some of it was necessary, but we need a think tank. We need to take the time to analyze it because when we talk about J. Edgar Hoover, we talk about in the 70s what he did, but we forget when he was
started in the 20s.
in the 20s, and it was
on Garvey.
Yeah, on Garvey, right? And the man, this is almost 50 years later,
and recruited their first informant, their first FBI agent to infiltrate one of the organizations and to take down Garvey. But he also infiltrated, just like what's my man name, Gene.
Oh, Gene Roberts.
Yeah, Gene Roberts. No one knew that Gene Roberts was a police when he was in the Organization of African Community, was
Malcolm
there
X.
saying that he was trying to breathe life into Malcolm after he had got shot. He also infiltrated the Black Panther Party in New York.
Immediately after that.
Right, and no one knew until was it the Panther 21 trial? One of the trials.
This New York Panther 21.
And he began to testify. You know, it's like, damn. That's when they found out that he was a government informant. So, I mean, we miss these things. And so what does that lead to? That leads to, it's a whole, that don't mean that you can't organize. That don't mean that you can't resist these tendencies, these behaviors from happening in the organization. It means that we had to discover ways to prevent these from happening. Meaning we just got to be more creative, more inventive in how we organize,
right,
and how we recruit.
Stop being naive, politically naive.
You know what I'm saying? What's the other brother who was the Sudan? You find Sudan, who was part of the one who was part of the tenant who hired Lumumba Shakur for the, He the one who was always similar to William O'Neill, similar to a lot of other people that always trigger happy talking about what we should be doing out here in these streets, and we should go shoot up something. We should go do this. Those who instigating is also setting you up for failure, because some of the acts, like the instance that he bring out in this book about when they was finna do a few actions, and they had set a couple bombs up.
Right,
And my man was a member of the organization. He went and deactivated the bombs, and so they never went off because he knew about it. But he was a police, and no one knew it.
Right.
No one knew it.
But again, this is something simple that you can learn in the documentary, The Dear Mama. But here in this book, it goes a little deeper, right?
Yes.
And the deeper part of it is where in the documentary it talks about the tension between Afeni and Lumumba, and where she becomes Lumumba's second wife, and his first wife is pissed off. We'll say that. What's the guy name? Sudan. And Lumumba's first wife began to have an affair.
She giving up all the goods.
Exactly.
Pillow talk.
Exactly.
Pillow talk.
And it could have been reversed. She could have been the police, and whatever the point of it is, like, we got to be able to prepare ourselves on all fronts.
I mean, this is about being serious.
Yeah, very serious. We can't allow them to take us more serious than we take ourselves. And that's the issue. And again, I think we need frontline stuff, but you have to you have to study to struggle. I mean, so can you talk about like the laws and international laws, the human laws, like when Malcolm is introducing our struggle from a human rights. So it's as a human rights struggle historically and across the country, the tagline of political prisoners is honor. Here in America, they don't want to honor our political prisoners, our prisoners of war.
No, absolutely, and that's a problem. Just a lot of people, we don't advocate for using international law. 1960, United Nations passed out the General Assembly Resolution 1514, which was pretty much the name of that resolution was a Declaration on the Granting of Independence to Colonial Countries and Peoples, and it was pretty much a touchstone for global decolonization at a higher or more rapid pace, because the United Nations have pushed. We got to keep in mind that the United Nations was founded in 1948 after World War II. So it was primarily established by Western powers.
Mhm.
However, as countries began to emerge from colonization, we're talking about countries in Asia, we're talking about countries in Latin America, countries in Africa. They began to become nation state members of the United Nations. And they were the ones who were pushing and advocating for human rights legislations, who was pushing for these, the complete abolishment of colonization, colonialism in the world. And so these laws are still relevant. They're still on the books. They all talked about. I mean, in just the International Bill of Human Rights, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. All these things start out. I mean, Article 1, Section 1. All peoples have a right to self-determination. And when they say people, what is a people? People in international within a framework of international law, peoples are bodies that share identities, nations. And some they don't refer to as peoples because some of these nations aren't nation states. They haven't been officially established as nations, just like New African people here in the United States. We are a nation. We are a nation out of power. We are a dominated nation. And as such, we are a people. We are the black peoples of America. The world for the black people or as African Americans, because so many within that tendency were welcome because that's the least threatening tendency to the settler state. That's the least. Understand what I say, that the integrations that don't make them whole Americans. It just means that tendency could be controlled. Those are the respectable politics. Those who look to the U.S. Constitution for a reference for their rights, as opposed to looking for human rights. And Malcolm X, was very clear that we're looking for more than civil rights and what they define. Don't get me wrong. Now, there's a lot to glean out of their laws, their Constitution, even their United States Declaration of Independence. There's a lot to glean from it. But we got to keep in mind, just like New African Independence Movement issued this Declaration of Independence in 1968 as a unilateral declaration, the United States issued this Declaration of Independence as a unilateral declaration against the colonization of Britain. They didn't want to keep sharing their wealth with the king. That's all that was about. We're doing all the heavy lifting. We holding these the Indians at bay, and we got these niggas on the plantation doing our work. What we paying them for? That's all that was about. And the Tea Party and this taxation without representation, that's foolishness. That's the overplay for the underplay. That's the okey doke. And then a lot of us still kind of follow that narrative. And there's a whole new history out here with all the receipts, not just some of them, not the selected receipts of the American democracy. You know what I'm saying? No, we're talking about liberation, and it's a lot of history that's missing. And the American family. I hate that title. I ain't even gonna lie. I hate that title, and I know he's heard that from a lot of people. I'm sure he heard even putting a K in American, spelling American with a K. But I hate that title because they were beyond America.
Not only that, it's the undermining. In one hand, you're acknowledging it, but then when you put the American in it, it just diluted immediately. Because again, what we're talking about, we have to we have to make that demarcation, and that demarcation, good, bad, or indifferent, was a struggle for liberation. Like, even like, I never really paid attention to like the Shakur name. It's similar to like the Muhammad and the Muslims, similar to Shabazz and the Nation of Islam. The Shakur name is beyond blood. It's actually tied to
It's a culture.
the culture of Black liberation first and foremost. And when you put the American family in it, it's
It's like the X in the nation.
yeah, it again, it dilutes everything we're talking about, like the suffering at the hands of American government, of an empire. Because what we underestimate, we talk about it amongst ourselves, like, oh man, you guys organized, man, and you got guns, whatever. They got bigger tanks, which may be the case, but does not mean that we can't win.
That's why Fidel has been so inspirational. And
in
The
third world,
struggle, the struggle in
in third
Cuba.
world people, period, in
I
general.
mean, yes, yes, and so, but that's also why we gotta extend ourselves beyond our own realm too, and pay attention to what's happening in the world. This conflict's happening right now
And
around the globe.
that's a problem now because of 67 years ago, folks was in tune what was going around the globe,
Yes,
and vice versa. Like Kwame Nkrumah, who leads Ghana to his first independence, we talk about that, but we don't talk about like he came here, he went to school here, not in terms of America, but he engulfed himself, in the struggle.
and he was
Of,
exposed to
yeah,
a lot during his time here.
which
And he interacted. What I'm saying, it was a number of people he met. He went to Lincoln University.
correct.
I believe that's in Pennsylvania.
It is. It is.
And he met a lot of people that was engaged in the struggle. But he always had plans to return to Ghana
Absolutely.
to engage in the struggle. So he was interested in people that was involved here.
He had
was networking.
He had a mission.
Yes.
And he knew how to get his mission, but he knew this is the route that he had to take to get his mission. But also, where we fail at is we talk about how powerful our enemy is, but our enemy is only powerful because the fact they study us, they examine us.
That's a mouthful.
I repeat, they study us, they examine us. Like COINTELPRO
they learn our weaknesses.
Absolutely.
And know how to exacerbate those weaknesses, to
Absolutely.
make those weaknesses bigger, whereas we should be transforming our weaknesses into strengths.
I mean, and this would make COINTELPRO so effective and just counterintelligence across the board. They're gonna. It's like being in a boxer or whatever you're fighting. If you don't have a strategy, if you don't understand your enemy, and we've underestimated our enemy, we continue, start showing up with a lot of rhetoric, continue same old behavior patterns. This like the first road to liberation is through transformation. The first road to transformation is through study. We have to study these and we have to understand what's at our side. So that, like when you talked about political prisoners and prisoners of war, and when they're in their court systems and they knew what they was up against, how they flipped the tide.
Oh yes.
How they talked about the dynamics of the struggle. Like, hey, we're a nation within a nation. We're fighting for Black liberation. All these things that was necessary, that changed the landscape of that tide. That juries, for the most part, for many people, walked out free. I mean, that was significant in the New York 21 case, where the Phoenix Shakur being her own lawyer, representing in the way that she utilized. This is what we mean by political education. This is how political education emerges, where you understand and find their weaknesses and use their weakness against them.
Yes, absolutely. Brother Siku Kamati asking us about the military dictatorship in Myanmar. Yes, indeed. That is very active right now. And we have military dictatorships everywhere. Right now, we have over there in Sudan, we have two branches of military who've overthrew a president who's been in office for 3 decades, vying over power. One of the problems with not dealing with the class component of the struggle and just appealing to just the raw naked nationalism is this tendency for military rule, which kind of dots the continent of Africa. A lot of these countries are ruled by former military generals, and they're using their positions of brute force to exploit their own countries,
right?
Which is, when we talking about neo-colonialism, we talking about the continuation of the exploitation of Africa. We talking about the continued exploitation of our nation right here inside the United States. It happens in conjunction with those who sell us to America. And I ain't gonna lie, I'm gonna review it again. But Maxine Waters, I never heard a voice as clear, crisp, and as detailed as how she addressed this one single topic, the crack impact, because she traveled throughout California, talked to anybody she could. She traveled to Central America, to Nicaragua, Costa Rica. She went to prisons in Central America to talk to people that was in jail.
Wow.
Who was involved in these trafficking, airplane pilots in Florida. She did this before these hearings. But she spoke because she was clear that my community and my people was being impacted, being devastated by this. And we don't understand that there is a war being waged upon us today. We live in a very liberal
I
times.
think you split that up. There's some of us do, some of us don't, and
I'm
some of us don't
speaking
care.
I'm generalizing.
Yeah.
I'm generalizing. No, there are absolutely people that know. There's absolutely people, but not at the scale or the a level of critical mass that we need to really, create a shift in how we move and how we organize and how we even focus ourselves going forward. I always ask people, what's the end game? Are we struggling, just to turn the water back on? Or are we struggling to turn the water back on so they can drink and be healthy, and then we can push the struggle to the next level of liberation? Because I'm gonna continue saying that until we end oppression will never end. It will never end until we end it. It's not just gonna die a natural death.
It just changes.
It's not gonna be a technological innovation that somehow just dissolves the tendency to oppress. That is not how it works, because greed is still a human tendency, and exploitation is what feeds greed.
Yeah. I mean, what it does is like a caterpillar, just changes its color and whatnot, changes its form, and this is why the term or the topic of study and struggle is important. The more we study, the better off we are in struggle. I would highly recommend folks to go and watch the documentary or the movie, The Battle of Algiers.
Oh man, excellent.
I repeat, The Battle of Algiers. I think
it's a French movie with subtitles. Excellent movie.
Yeah, I think it's the best movie in terms of communicating, being in a very concentrated, very high intense warfare, and organizing within that. Right,
creating a culture, a revolutionary culture. They was cultivating a culture.
And one of the things a previous generation before us is taking the time to restudy our struggle and looking at a lot of the failures. And one thing that they identified was the lack of secure communication. I repeat, the lack of secure communication.
We talk too much.
We talk too fucking much.
About things we ain't got no business talking about people we ain't got no business talking about. We want to know things and share things about things we for the most part ain't got no business. And we do it to the detriment of a larger struggle, and not thinking, because we think that there's a such thing as innocent activity in this struggle.
It's not.
Ain't no innocent activity.
And not only we talk too much, we don't value overall and consistently the importance how to talk, what to say. We just run our lips and things, or like some of us, like I say, I'm about to say something, or I stop and like, why you can continue. Like there's a need to know, and that not knowing can save your life. And those are basic principles. Those are basic organizing strategies. And we've done some of those things. Again, one of the things, like in this book again, it talks about so like some of the safe houses. And we had to stop romanticizing our struggle. Like the struggle was real. And
40, 50 years behind bars for some of these people.
Yeah, and the more,
and we didn't get them out.
Right. And that speaks to the downtrodden of our struggle with the fact that we had to find other avenues and means to get us out, and that put holes in our movement for liberation. So any closing remarks, good brother?
Yeah, I think this is an ongoing conversation. But absolutely, just want to say we got political prisoners. I'm so glad Mutulu's out. Jalil Munta King, Sekou Odinga, who's one of the subjects of this book, American Family. So many have gotten out. Russell Maroon Schultz, he died.
Robert,
member of the Angola 3, 2 members of the Angola 3. We continue, you know what I'm saying? We're not acknowledging our forebears. That's a sign of struggle, because I admire and respect everybody that made any degree of sacrifice. I admire the people today that put themselves out there, and people putting in the work, because all the work is necessary. All of it is important. What's needed is that we tie all these things to national liberations. You know what I'm saying? That we tie, teenage pregnancies and delinquent young New African boys to national liberation. All these things, as we said before, as Amos Wilson once articulated, that if we don't train our young men to defend and liberate the nation, then we will find ourselves at some point defending ourselves against our young men. And that has happened today, and that is our responsibility. We are a community. We should act as a community. We are a nation. We got to, bring people in, and we got to serve. We got to create revolutionary culture. And with that, my last words: revolutionary culture is the building of the lifestyle that we want to use to lead us to liberation, which was also shield us from the enemy's repression to some extent.
Secure communication is a part of that. Peace. Catch you next time.